Hi, everyone. I'm Phil Rude, and thanks for checking out what I've got to talk about this week. This afternoon, I was scrolling through movies on Netflix, looking for something to watch, which is probably the best reason to scroll through movies on Netflix. It would be really weird if someone was doing that, and then they told you they were just taking an inventory of what was available. Like, just seeing what's in stock. Regardless of that, I was scrolling, and Christy, my wife, is sitting next to me, and by this time was probably starting to think that I was just taking inventory because I was scrolling for quite a while. And then she pointed out that she saw John Carpenter's name and that I'd scrolled past it. She didn't see what the movie was, she just saw Carpenter's name. So now's a good time to point out that my wife has a condition that we refer to in our house as movie amnesia. She has a tendency to watch a movie, and she'll even sometimes enjoy that movie very much, and then she will erase any trace of that movie from her brain, from her mind, from her memory banks. She does remember some movies that are a really big deal to her, that she loves, or something that made an impression on her very early, something like, The Breakfast Club or Poltergeist, these movies from our childhood that were a really big deal to her. But she's not into the movies on a level where she remembers every single thing that she watches, or that she knows a lot of directors or writers. She may be familiar with names, but she doesn't necessarily attach them to movies or anything like that. She's, a regular movie person and not some obsessive dork about it, like some people I know who may or may not be speaking these words right now. My point is that she, as a rule, doesn't care about a lot of directors. So when she sees a name like John Carpenter, it's a name she does know because she knows I'm a fan and she's heard me talk about him to a degree that she probably deserves some sort of medal for tolerance. Which brings me to something I've talked about before. I'm going to tangent my tangent here and talk about something I've talked about before. It is not important that you find a partner or a spouse who's into the exact same things as you. What's important is to find a partner or a spouse who respects the things that you're into. Like I said, Chrissy's a regular movie person, not a nerd about it, but she's really cool with me being a nerd about movies. She knows I love movies. She knows that I obsess about analyzing movies, that I enjoy going to the movies, these kinds of things. She's supportive about me making art and making comics, even though she doesn't really read comics herself. And that kind of stuff is really huge in finding a partner. A lot of people think, I need to find a partner who's exactly like me. That way we can all be into the same things together. And not necessarily the truth. You want to have some overlap. Christy and I are a Venn diagram, but we're two really, really different people. All that said, back to my original point, she doesn't know a lot about directors, so she sees a name like John Carpenter. It does stand out to her, and she's going to point it out to me because she knows I'm a John Carpenter fan. So she points out John Carpenter's name, and then I scrolled past it. So I go back to see what it was. I scroll back, and I find that it is 1998's John Carpenter's Vampires, starring douche in human form James Woods. Now, this is a point where I have to make an asterisk on my John Carpenter fandom. That I am a fan of his filmography, but only as far as They Live. You get past that and into some of the 90s stuff, it's a little wonky. A lot of it's not really for me as much as I love Snake Plissken. I don't really jive with Escape from LA. I know it's bad on purpose. It's camp. I get it. I'm tangenting again. The important thing about her pointing out John Carpenter's Vampires is it took me back to me remembering when I had my first apartment down here in Florida in the late 90s, and across the street from where I lived was a plaza and there was a non-Blockbuster video store. I know we're all really nostalgic for Blockbuster right now, but if you were around in the video rental era, you'll know that Blockbuster was often not even close to the best video store in your town. If you lived in a small city or something like that where you had options, Blockbuster was the big corporate behemoth video store, which, like almost all things corporate, meant that it was also the most mediocre. Small regional chains or mom and pop stores were almost always better. And this store across from my apartment was a small kind of regional chain. I think it was Hollywood Video or something like that. I don't quite remember. Anyway, I was in there all the time, and I remember going to rent John Carpenter's Vampires, mostly because I had seen almost all of the new releases, or at least the ones that I had interest in seeing by that point, because renting movies and drinking beer was something I did almost every night, because it was the thing to do for young, single, broke alcoholics, and that's just kind of how I spent a lot of my evenings after work. So I take the movie up to the counter, and the kid working there looked at it. He looked back at me and he said, "Are you sure you want this? Vampires blows, man." And he didn't say this in some condescending like way that we associate with a lot of hipster record store guys or comic store guys, or even back in that day, there were video store guys who have a tendency to do that. This wasn't a shot at my taste. This wasn't some film bro take. Conversely, this was a kid knowing my taste because I was in there all the time. He was making a judgment call and saying, "You watch better movies than this. I don't want you to waste your time." And then he made another recommendation, which I honestly don't remember what it was. I tell you this entire story of this to say that I still, to this day, have not seen John Carpenter's Vampires. And that did not change today when my wife pointed it out. But it brought something else to mind, and it's also the story of this. It's the story of why I am forever disappointed in the movies we think you'll like section of streaming services. The algorithm has replaced that kid in the local video store. But that code, that highly engineered piece of software that costs millions of dollars to develop, will never replace what a 17-year-old movie nerd can do. It can't know me. It can't know why I'm watching what I'm watching. It can't make recommendations based on what I've watched in the past and what my tastes actually are. It can't recommend something to me and say, or take something that I picked out and say, "No, I'm going to make a different recommendation because I don't think you'll like this." Last fall, I watched all the Friday the 13th movies. And for weeks after that, all the streamers recommended to me was other slasher trash. Had it been 1998, I could have gone into the video store, taken my VHS tape of Jason Lives up to the counter, and I could have explained to that kid that I was watching all of these for a podcast series that I was doing, and I could have known that he would not have spent weeks after that trying to get me to watch every other slasher movie. He also wouldn't know what a podcast was, and I would have also not had to watch probably 2 or 3 other movies in the Friday the 13th series, which I think mostly would have been good. My point is, algorithms, AI, and even social media, social networks, they all exist as replacements for real interactions with real people. I know we like to look at social networks as, I'm connecting with people I never would have met in real life. I'm connecting with people overseas. I'm connecting with people on the other side of the world. That's all great. But it's not the same as a human, person-to-person interaction. This simple story right here explains why they can never really replace that. They can never really do that. Because no person in real life would ever recommend a movie starring James Woods to me. And that's the humanity that the online world is missing. All Seriousness aside, not seriousness aside, all joking aside, although I am serious about James Woods being a douche. I do think we're missing that human element, and I do miss the video store for that reason, especially sort of the local video store. It was great. It was a great moment in time. I don't miss Blockbuster. I miss those guys. Anyway, thanks for listening to this long and rambling story about a James Woods movie and I'm going to say lesser era Carpenter movie. Don't take shots at me. I still love John Carpenter. I know he would tell me to F off because that's just what he does, and I love him for it even more. But yeah, that's how I got here. Thanks for checking out this comic panel that I'm working on in this video, by the way. I know I haven't talked about that. Again, this is a Shepherd panel. I'll talk more about this in the not too distant future. Until we meet again, thanks for checking it out.